The snowstorm outside howled like a wounded animal, but inside the penthouse of the summit, the silence was even more terrifying. Isabella Rossi balanced the monumental box of the three-tier cake in her arms, her muscles burning from the effort. She was covered in snow, her eyelashes damp and her cheap boots leaving small puddles of water on the immaculate Italian marble of the entrance hall. "Excuse me?" she called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Dolce Vita Bakery. Delivery for Mr. Vitale." No one answered. The penthouse smelled of old money, expensive whiskey, and disaster. Isabella took a few more steps inside. The Christmas decorations were stunning, emerald green velvet garlands, golden lights, and a tree that touched the double-height ceiling. But something was wrong. There was a shattered crystal vase on the floor. A champagne glass tipped over on a side table, liquid bubbling into the Persian rug. And, at the top of the double marble staircase, a white wedding dress, torn and abandoned like a ghost, thrown over the banister. "The party is over," a male voice thundered from the shadows of the living room. Isabella almost dropped the cake. She steadied the box, her heart racing, and looked in the direction of the voice. A man stepped out of the shadows. And God in heaven, he was the most devastatingly handsome and terrifying man she had ever seen. He wore a custom-made black tuxedo, but the bow tie was undone, hanging around the open collar of his white shirt. He held a glass of liquor so tightly his knuckles were white. He had hair dark as night, a jawline that looked carved from granite, and eyes, blue eyes so cold and intense they seemed to burn her skin from a distance. Matteo Vitale. The Don. The man who, according to neighborhood rumors, controlled the docks, the unions, and half of City Hall. He looked at her. No, he didn't just look, he devoured her with his eyes. His gaze swept Isabella from top to bottom, noting the threadbare coat, the nose red from the cold, the brown curls escaping her wool beanie, and finally, the cake box she held like a shield. "Did the doorman let you up?" he asked. His voice was velvet and gravel, dangerously seductive. The door was unlocked," Isabella stammered, hypnotized by his intensity. "I brought the engagement cake. Raspberry and white chocolate, just as Miss Bianca requested." Matteo let out a short, dry laugh, devoid of any humor. He finished his drink in one gulp and walked toward her. He moved like a big cat, predatory and elegant. "There is no more Miss Bianca." He stopped a meter away from her. The heat radiating from his body was palpable, combating the cold she had brought in from the street. My fiancé decided, 30 minutes before the party, that she prefers to run off with the Pilates instructor than marry a Vitale. Isabella blinked, processing the information. "I'm sorry, that's terrible. But, well, the cake still costs $500. And I need to be paid." Matteo raised a dark eyebrow. Her audacity seemed to surprise him. Most people trembled before him. She was trembling, yes, but from cold, not fear. $500, he repeated, taking another step. He was too close now. Isabella could smell him, sandalwood, rain, and danger. "You're worried about $500 when I just lost a $200 million merger contract that depended on this wedding happening tonight? My bakery will go bankrupt if I don't pay the rent tomorrow," Isabella retorted, lifting her chin. "Your millions are your problem. My $500 is my problem." A charged silence fell over the room. Matteo studied her. His eyes dropped to her lips, then back to her defiant brown eyes. Something shifted in his expression. The cold fury was replaced by something more calculating. And hungry. "Put the cake on the table," he ordered, his voice huskier. Isabella obeyed, walking to the glass dining table and setting down the box. When she turned, Matteo was right behind her, blocking her exit. "Take off your coat." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. "What?" Take off the coat. I want to see you. I'm not that kind of girl, Mr. Vitale, she said, backing up until her hip hit the table. Pay for the cake and I'll leave. I'm not asking for sex, tesoro, treasure, he said softly, reaching out and pulling the wool beanie from her head. Her brown hair cascaded over her shoulders. He twirled a lock around his finger, the touch sending an electric shock down her spine. I am evaluating a business opportunity. He looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the soft curve of her neck, the slim waist hidden under the loose sweater, the natural beauty that not even exhaustion could hide. What is your size? He asked suddenly. What? Dress. What is your size? 38. Why? A slow, dangerous smile curved Matteo Vitale's lips. It was the smile of a man who had just found the solution to an impossible problem. Bianca wore a 38, he murmured, eyes gleaming. And her dress is right there on the stairs. He leaned forward, planting his hands on the table on either side of Isabella, trapping her in his web of pheromones and power. I have a proposition for you, Baker. He brushed his nose against her neck, inhaling the scent of vanilla and sugar she carried. Forget the $500. I'll give you $100,000 right now. In cash. And save your bakery. Isabella's knees went weak. What do I have to do? She whispered, unable to look away from his mouth. Matteo lifted her face, his blue eyes piercing her soul. Put on the dress. Put on the ring that traitor left behind. And for the next 12 months, you will be Mrs. Vitale. That's madness, Isabella breathed, her heart beating so hard it hurt. We don't know each other. Even better, Matteo countered. No feelings to get in the way. Just business. He pulled back slightly but took her hand. His touch was warm, possessive, and firm. My guests arrive in an hour. The blizzard has locked down the roads, so no one knows Bianca ran away. He squeezed her hand. You have a choice, Isabella. You can walk out that door, go back into the cold, and go bankrupt tomorrow. Or you can walk up those stairs, wear the silk, and be the Queen of New York by my side. He looked at her mouth again, and this time he didn't hide the desire. Say yes, and I promise, it will be the most unforgettable Christmas of your life. Isabella looked at the snow outside, then at Matteo's hypnotic blue eyes. $100,000. The bakery saved. And a year alongside this dangerous man who looked at her as if she were the most delicious sweet he had ever seen. She took a deep breath, smelling danger and desire. Does the dress have a corset? She asked, her voice trembling. Matteo's smile widened, triumphant and incredibly sexy. I'll help you close it. Isabella swallowed hard. She had a feeling closing the dress would be the easy part. The hard part would be surviving Matteo Vitale without handing over her heart. I accept. The master bedroom of Matteo Vitale was bigger than Isabella's entire bakery. Glass walls revealed the snowstorm outside, but inside, the room was dominated by a king-size bed with black satin sheets and a gas fireplace casting dancing shadows across the floor. Isabella stood before a full-length mirror with a gold frame, trembling. Not from cold, but from pure adrenaline. Bianca's wedding dress was thrown over the bed. It was a masterpiece of Italian silk and chantilly lace, with a plunging back in a train that looked like sea foam. $100,000, she whispered to her pale reflection, trying to calm her shaking hands as she took off her old sweater. You can do this, Bella. It's just a costume. A very expensive costume. She stripped off her clothes, remaining only in simple cotton lingerie. She felt vulnerable, exposed in that room that smelled of man and power. Carefully, she stepped into the dress. The silk slid over her skin like warm water, hugging her curves in a way jeans never did. It went up perfectly over her hips but stuck at the back. The invisible zipper and tiny pearl buttons were impossible to close alone. "Damn it," she muttered, twisting her arms uselessly. "Need help?" The voice came from the door, raspy and sudden. Isabella jumped, spinning to face Matteo. She crossed her arms over her chest instinctively, though the dress covered the front. Matteo was leaning against the doorframe, his jacket already off. He had rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt, revealing strong forearms marked by veins and a gold watch that cost more than her life. He didn't look away. On the contrary, his blue eyes traveled slowly over her body, lingering where the silk clung to her waist and hips. There was a raw, naked appreciation there that made Isabella's stomach clench. "I said I would help," he murmured, pushing off the door and walking toward her. The room seemed to shrink with every step he took. He stopped behind her, so close she could feel the heat of his body through the thin layer of fabric. "Turn to the mirror," he ordered softly. Isabella obeyed, mesmerized. In the reflection, she saw the image of the two of them, her, small and wrapped in white, him, tall, dark, and dangerous behind her. Matteo's hands touched the bare skin of her back. His fingers were warm and rough, a shocking contrast to the smoothness of the silk. Isabella held her breath. "Breathe, Tesoro," he whispered near her ear, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror. "If you faint, you'll wrinkle the dress." He began to pull up the zipper, slowly. Torturously slowly. His knuckles grazed her spine with every inch, sending shockwaves through her entire nervous system. "Why are you doing this?" Isabella asked, her voice faltering. "Hiring a stranger, it's risky." "Risk excites me," Matteo replied, fastening the last button at the nape of her neck. He didn't move his hands away. Instead, his thumbs caressed the base of her neck, causing her to tilt her head back involuntarily. "And you are not a stranger, Isabella. You are my wife. At least, that is what they will believe." He stepped away, but the loss of physical contact left her skin tingling. Matteo went to a bedside table and picked up a black velvet box. "Give me your left hand." She extended her hand. Matteo slid a ring onto her ring finger. It was heavy. A solitaire diamond, emerald cut, the size of an ice cube, surrounded by sapphires. "Bianca chose the ring," he said disdainfully. "But it looks better on you." Her skin was too pale. "Yours has color, has life." He held her hand for a moment longer than necessary, stroking her palm with his thumb. "Only one thing missing." Matteo let go of her hand and lightly messed up his own hair, taking away the air of perfection and leaving him looking more wild. More intimate. As if he had just gotten out of bed. "Let your hair down," he instructed. Isabella shook her head, and the brown curls fell free over her bare shoulders and the white lace. Matteo watched her, his expression unreadable, but his breathing seemed a little heavier. "Perfect," he decreed. An anxious bride, a little disheveled, in love. "In love," Isabella repeated, the bitter irony on her tongue. "Act like you adore me, Isabella." He moved closer again, holding her chin and tilting her face up. "Act like you can't keep your hands off me. Because if my grandmother gets suspicious, or if my partner sense weakness, what happens? They eat us alive." He smiled, that predatory smile that made her knees weak. "And I prefer to be the only one devouring you." The sound of the private elevator beeping on the floor below broke the spell. Loud voices, laughter, and music began to float up the stairs. "Showtime," Matteo said, offering her his arm. The mask of coldness returned to his face, but his eyes still burned. "Are you ready to lie like a professional, Mrs. Vitale?" Isabella looked at the diamond ring, then at the devastating man beside her. She took a deep breath, assuming the role. Only if you promise not to let me fall in these heels. Matteo laughed low, a sound that vibrated in his chest and lodged straight into her heart. I never let what is mine fall. Let's go. They walked to the top of the marble staircase. Down below, about 50 people filled the lobby. Men in expensive tuxedos, women covered in jewelry, waiters circling with trays. When Matteo and Isabella appeared at the top of the stairs, the music stopped. The conversation ceased. 50 pairs of eyes turned upward. Isabella felt panic rise in her throat. They knew. They had to know she was a fraud, the Kate girl. Matteo sensed her hesitation. He covered her hand on his arm with his large, warm hand and squeezed firmly. Smile, he whispered, only for her to hear. The world is ours. Then, he spoke loudly, his baritone voice filling the hall. Buonasera everyone. Matteo broke into a dazzling smile, pulling Isabella closer to his body, possessive and proud. I apologize for the delay. My fiancé and I got a little distracted upstairs. Wicked laughter and polite applause echoed through the hall. Isabella's face blushed violently, which probably only helped sell the lie. I would like to present the woman who stole my heart and saved my Christmas, Matteo continued, looking at Isabella with an adoration so convincing that, for a second, she almost believed it. My future wife, Isabella. As they descended the steps to applause, Isabella saw an elderly woman in the front row, dressed in black, leaning on a silver cane, watching her with eagle eyes. The grandmother. And next to her, a blond man with a snake smile who looked at Isabella not with admiration, but with recognition. Isabella's heart stopped. He knows me, she thought, the icy panic returning. That man has bought cakes at my shop. Matteo squeezed her waist as they reached the bottom of the stairs. Breathe, he murmured, kissing her temple in front of everyone. The game has begun. The blond man stood out in the crowd like a wine stain on a white carpet. He held a glass of champagne and smiled with a malice that made Isabella's stomach churn. It was Stefano, the son of a wealthy banker who frequented Dolce Vita not for the sweets, but to harass the female employees. Isabella had already kicked him out of the shop twice for trying to touch one of the waitresses. He knew who she was. And he was coming straight for them. Matteo, Caro. Stefano shouted, his voice a little too loud, betraying the alcohol. He stopped in front of the couple, his eyes running over Isabella's dress with lecherous recognition. And who is this vision? Wait. I know you. Isabella's heart stopped. She squeezed Matteo's arm tightly. You're the Kate girl, aren't you? Stefano laughed, pointing his glass at her. The baker from 42nd Street. Isabella, right? I'd recognize those eyes, he lowered his tone, and that body anywhere, even covered in haute couture. A murmur ran through the people nearby. Don Vitale's fiancé is a baker? A commoner? Isabella opened her mouth to deny it, to invent a lie, but her throat was dry. Matteo didn't move. He didn't let go of her waist. He didn't even blink. The only change was in the temperature around him, which seemed to drop 10 degrees below zero. Stefano, Matteo said. His voice was soft, almost affectionate, but it carried the weight of an anvil. You are drunk. Drunk? Maybe. Stefano took a step forward, invading Isabella's personal space. But not blind. Matteo, you picked up the delivery girl to replace Bianca? That's hilarious. How much did you pay her? Isabella felt tears of humiliation burn her eyes. The disguise was over before it even began. That was when Matteo laughed. A rich, deep, and totally relaxed laugh that silenced the small circle of gossips around them. Did you hear that, amore? Matteo looked at Isabella, eyes shining with staged amusement. He thinks I picked you up. As if a woman like you could simply be picked up. He turned back to Stefano, the smile vanishing, replaced by an expression of lethal boredom. Isabella is, in fact, the owner of the best bakery in New York. That's how we met. I went to buy a cannoli and left in love. Matteo lied with frightening ease, pulling Isabella's hand to kiss her knuckles. She is an artist, Stefano. A woman building her own empire with flour and sugar, while you merely spend your father's inheritance on cheap drinks and ill-fitting suits. The insult was subtle but cutting. Stefano's face turned red. But she's poor, Matteo. She's not of our world. Matteo let go of Isabella's hand and took a step toward Stefano. The difference in height and presence was brutal. Matteo looked like a lion staring down a hyena. He placed his hand on Stefano's shoulder, squeezing. Isabella saw the blond man grimace in pain, though Matteo was smiling at the audience. Her world is now my world, Matteo whispered, loud enough only for the close circle to hear. And anyone who disrespects my future wife is disrespecting me. And you know what happens to those who disrespect me in my own house, don't you, Stefano? The blood drained from Stefano's face. He tried to back away, but Matteo's hand held him like a steel claw. Why yes, Don Vitale. I apologize. It was a bad joke. Terrible, Matteo agreed, releasing him with a slight shove. Go home, Stefano. Before the snow gets worse. Or before you trip and hurt yourself severely on the stairs. Stefano swallowed hard, muttered an apology to Isabella without even looking in her eyes, and disappeared into the crowd like smoke. Matteo turned back to Isabella. The mask of control flickered for a second, revealing genuine concern. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Isabella was trembling, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. You lied for me. You defended me. You are my fiancé tonight, he said, fixing a lock of her hair that had come out of place. No one touches you. No one insults you. That is rule number 1. The orchestra in the corner of the hall began to play a slow waltz. Dance with me. It wasn't a request. Matteo pulled her to the center of the hall before she could protest. He placed one hand on her waist, pulling her to glue their bodies together, and intertwined his other hand with hers. I don't know how to waltz, Isabella whispered in panic, looking at his expensive shoes. I'm going to step on your foot. Just follow my body, Matteo murmured, starting to move. I'll guide you. And he did. He was strong, steady, moving her across the marble floor as if she weighed nothing. Isabella had to tilt her head back to look at him. Their faces were inches apart. You were amazing with Stefano, she admitted, feeling strangely safe in the arms of that dangerous man. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Matteo's blue eyes dropped to her mouth. We're selling a romance, remember? We have to make it look real. He lowered his hand from her waist to her hip, squeezing the silk of the dress. The touch was possessive, intimate. Isabella gasped. Matteo, people are looking. Let them look. Let them be envious. He spun her, the skirt of the dress opening in a white fan, and pulled her back hard, gluing his chest against hers. She could feel his heart beating strong through the tuxedo. His scent enveloped her, intoxicating her. Tell me, Isabella, he whispered against her temple, his stubble grazing her sensitive skin. What is an innocent baker doing with a man like me? Aren't you afraid? I should be, she replied, her voice shaky but defiant. She raised her eyes to meet his. But you just saved me. Monsters don't save princesses, Matteo. His gaze darkened. The music seemed to fade away. There were only the two of them in that crowded hall. "I am not a prince, tesoro." He tilted his head, lips brushing the corner of her mouth, a promise of a kiss that didn't happen. "I am the villain of this story. And villains don't save princesses, they steal them." Isabella felt her legs go weak. Desire exploded in her belly, hot and liquid. She wanted to kiss him. Right there, in front of everyone. Contract or not, money or not. "Matteo." The voice came from behind them, dry like old paper. They stopped dancing, but Matteo didn't let her go. He turned slowly, keeping his protective arm around Isabella. Before them stood the elderly woman in black. The matriarch. Donna Elena Vitale. She was small, stooped, but her eyes were as sharp as her grandson's. She leaned on her cane and looked at Isabella with an indecipherable expression. "So," the old woman said, her voice raspy. "Is this the reason Bianca ran away?" Isabella froze. Matteo squeezed her waist. Nah, this is Isabella. My future wife." Donna Elena took a step forward. She raised her wrinkled hand and touched Isabella's face. It wasn't a caress, it was an inspection. She turned Isabella's face to the left, then to the right, as if buying a horse. "Pretty," the old woman grumbled. "But has eyes of someone who has known hunger." She released Isabella's face and looked at her grandson. Bianca was weak. A porcelain doll. "This one." Donna Elena tapped the tip of her cane on the marble floor. "This one has fire. I saw how she looked at Stefano. She wanted to kill him." A slow, terrible smile spread across the grandmother's wrinkled face. "I approve, Matteo." She turned to Isabella, eyes gleaming. "But beware, girl. Entering this family is easy. Leaving." She laughed, a dry sound. "Leaving is impossible." Donna Elena walked away, the crowd parting for her like the Red Sea. Isabella let out the breath she was holding, trembling in Matteo's arms. "She liked you," Matteo said, appearing surprised and relieved. "She said leaving is impossible," Isabella whispered, watching the old woman walk away. "What does that mean?" Matteo pulled her face so she looked only at him. His expression was serious now, the game was over. "It means the contract has changed, Isabella." He ran his thumb over her bottom lip. "My grandmother just gave her blessing. Now, there is no going back. You are bound to me." For a year, she reminded him, trying to keep reality in focus. Matteo didn't answer. He just looked at her with that intense hunger again, and Isabella had the terrible feeling that for Matteo Vitale, a year would not be enough. Suddenly, the hall lights flickered. Once. Twice. And then, they went out completely. Screams of surprise echoed in the darkness. "Stay close to me," Matteo's voice was a growl in the dark. He pulled her behind him. "What is happening?" Isabella asked, panic returning. "The power went out." "Must be the storm," Matteo said, but Isabella felt the tension in his muscles. He drew something from his jacket. The metallic click was unmistakable. A gun. Or, Matteo completed in total darkness, it wasn't the storm. The darkness was absolute, heavy as velvet. The hall, previously full of music and laughter, was now a chaos of muffled screams, the sound of breaking glass, and panicked voices calling names. But Isabella didn't feel fear. Not anymore. Because she was pressed against a wall of muscle and heat. Matteo's arm was around her like an iron bar, pinning her against his chest. In his other hand, she knew he held the gun, though she couldn't see it. She could feel his heart beating against her back, not racing with panic, but at a steady, lethal rhythm, ready for violence. "Matteo?" she whispered, voice trembling. "Shoo," he hissed near her ear. "Don't move. Don't make a sound. My men are checking the perimeter." Seconds dragged like hours. Isabella clutched the lapel of his tuxedo, burying her face in the expensive fabric that smelled of him. If this was an attack, she would be an easy target in that bright white dress. Suddenly, a strong light cut through the darkness. Not the main lights, but beams from tactical flashlights sweeping the hall. "Don Vitale!" The voice of one of the guards, Luca, echoed. "The main generator failed due to the ice. The city power line is down. There are no intruders. The perimeter is secure." Isabella felt the tension leave Matteo's body in a physical wave. He didn't holster the gun immediately, but the grip around her changed from human shield to protective embrace. "It's just the storm," he murmured, his deep voice vibrating in her chest. "We are safe." He turned to the guards, his voice assuming that tone of command that made everyone obey instantly. "Bring the emergency candles. Calm the guests. The party continues, but bring champagne. Alcohol calms nerves better than apologies." Then, he looked at Isabella. In the gloom, illuminated only by the wandering beams of flashlights, his eyes looked almost black. "You're shaking," he noted. The ballroom transformed. What was once a cold, modern space lit by electric chandeliers now looked like the interior of an ancient cathedral. Hundreds of thick candles were brought in by the staff, spreading a golden, flickering, and infinitely more seductive light throughout the space. Shadows danced on the walls. The smell of melted wax mixed with the scent of flowers and champagne. The tension of fear dissipated, replaced by an excited murmur. For the guests, the blackout had become the highlight of the party, something exclusive and dramatic. But for Isabella, the only real thing was the warmth of Matteo's jacket. He had taken off his tuxedo jacket and placed it over her shoulders. The heavy fabric, impregnated with his scent, enveloped her like a hug, protecting her from the cold seeping through the glass windows. "You're pale," Matteo murmured, observing her by candlelight. He looked even more dangerous now, just in the white shirt, the gun holster visible under his left arm. "You haven't eaten anything all night." "I was busy trying not to be discovered as a fraud," she replied, trying to smile, but her lips trembled. Matteo frowned. He looked at the crowd going back to drinking and talking, then at her. "Come." He took her hand and pulled her, not to the center of the party, but to a discreet side door. "Where are we going?" Isabella asked, stumbling a little in her heels as she tried to keep up with his long strides. "To a place where I don't have to share you." They crossed a dark corridor and entered the penthouse kitchen. It was an industrial space, all stainless steel, but it was empty now. The waiters were all in the hall serving drinks. The kitchen was lit only by the moonlight and snow entering through a high window, and by a single candle Matteo lit atop the marble island. The silence there was intimate. The party seemed miles away. Matteo lifted Isabella by the waist and sat her on top of the cold marble island. The wedding dress bunched around her like a cloud. She was at his eye level. "What are you doing?" she whispered, heart beating in her throat. Matteo didn't answer. He stepped away for a moment, going to a box that had been left in a corner, forgotten in the confusion. The cake box. Her cake. He brought it to the island, opened the lid, and took a silver knife. He cut a generous slice of the white chocolate cake with raspberries she had decorated so carefully hours ago, when she was still just Isabella, the indebted baker. He placed the plate beside her and picked up a fork. "Taste it," he ordered softly, taking a piece and bringing it to her mouth. Isabella hesitated. The scene was surreal. The Mafia Boss of New York, armed and dangerous, feeding her cake in a dark kitchen. She opened her mouth and accepted the piece. The flavor exploded on her tongue, the sweetness of white chocolate, the tartness of raspberry, the moist texture of the batter. It was perfect. She moaned softly, closing her eyes for a second. When she opened them, Matteo was watching her mouth with an intensity that made her stomach churn. "Good?" he asked, voice husky. "It's the best thing I've ever made," she admitted. Matteo took another piece, but didn't bring it to her mouth. Instead, he ate it. He closed his eyes, savoring, and Isabella found herself fascinated by the movement of his throat when he swallowed. "You have talent, Isabella," he said, licking a drop of cream from his lower lip. "It's sweet, rich, addictive." He stepped forward, standing between her legs that dangled from the counter. His hands rested on her thighs, over the silk of the dress. "Do you know what I thought when I saw you enter the lobby today?" he murmured, leaning in until their noses almost touched. Isabella shook her head, unable to speak. "I thought the cake wasn't the only delicious thing that had just arrived in my house." Isabella's face burned. "Matteo, this is a contract. You said just business." "I am a businessman," he agreed, his hand sliding slowly up her thighs, pulling the skirt of the dress up, inch by inch. "And I know how to recognize when an asset has been undervalued." He dropped the fork on the table. His hands were now on her waist, squeezing. "You stood up to Stefano. You charmed my grandmother. And you made this damn cake that tastes like paradise." He brushed his lips against her cheek. "I think $100,000 is too little for you." "Then raise the price," she challenged, the courage of the wine, or desire, speaking louder. Matteo laughed against her neck, a vibrant sound. "Ruthless negotiator. I like that." He lifted his face and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss like the one on the stairs. It was a hungry kiss, tasting of raspberry and whiskey. His mouth took hers with a possessiveness that made her dizzy. Isabella buried her hands in his hair, pulling him closer, forgetting the contract, forgetting the mafia, forgetting everything except the heat of this man. His tongue explored her mouth, and she felt his groan vibrate against her lips. He pulled her to the edge of the counter, pressing his body against the center of hers, making it clear exactly how much he wanted her. For a moment, they were just a man and a woman consuming each other in the darkness of a kitchen. "Matteo." The voice came from the hallway. "One of the guards." Matteo pulled away from her, panting. His eyes were black with desire, mouth swollen and red. He looked at her as if he wanted to devour her whole right there. "Cazzo, shit," he cursed softly, running a hand through his hair. "Boss," the voice called again. "The power is back. The guests are starting to leave." Matteo took a deep breath, regaining his composure with visible effort. He adjusted his shirt, but didn't step completely away from Isabella. "We aren't finished," he promised her, voice low and raspy. "The night isn't over yet, Mrs. Vitale." He helped her down from the counter, but before letting her go, he ran his thumb over her lower lip, wiping away a trace of cream that remained, or perhaps just marking her once more. "Go to the bedroom. Wait for me there." Isabella nodded, legs wobbly. As Matteo left to dismiss the guests, she remained alone in the kitchen, with his taste in her mouth and a terrifying certainty, she wasn't just pretending to be his wife. She was starting to want to be it for real. The silence returned to the penthouse, but now it felt different. It was no longer a silence of abandonment and disaster like when Isabella arrived. It was a charged silence, electric, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm or a surrender. Isabella stood in the middle of the master bedroom, hugging her own body. The fire in the gas fireplace cast an orange glow over the fur rug. She was still wearing the wedding dress, feeling like a luxury doll left on the shelf. The doorknob turned. The sound of the lock clicking echoed loudly in the room. Matteo entered. He looked exhausted, but in a devastating way. His hair was messy where she had run her fingers through it in the kitchen. His white shirt was unbuttoned to the middle of his chest, the tie hanging loosely around his neck. He carried 2 glasses and the bottle of whiskey that had survived the night. He stopped, looking at her. His blue eyes traced her silhouette illuminated by the fire. "They're gone," he said, voice husky. He walked to the side table, poured the drinks, and extended a glass to her. "Drink. You'll need it to sleep." Isabella accepted the glass, her fingers brushing his. Did they believe it? My grandmother believes what she wants to believe. Stefano is too scared to talk. And the others? Matteo took a long sip. The others saw how I looked at you. No one doubts a man who looks at a woman with hunger. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. It was an act. Matteo took a step toward her. Was it? He didn't wait for an answer. He set the glass on the table and gestured for her to turn around. "The dress," he murmured. "Let's take this off. You've already fulfilled your role for today." Isabella turned, giving her back to him. She felt his hands on the nape of her neck, moving her heavy hair aside. The shiver was instant. The zipper went down with a hissing sound, slow and agonizing. With every inch of skin exposed to the cold air of the room, Isabella felt the heat of Matteo's body right behind her. He didn't touch her with his hands, only with proximity, and that was almost worse. When the dress opened completely, sliding down her hips and falling into a pool of white silk on the floor, Isabella was left only in lingerie. She crossed her arms in front of her chest, feeling exposed. I didn't bring pajamas," she whispered, lacking the courage to turn around. "I came to deliver a cake, remember?" The sound of drawers opening and closing was heard. Seconds later, something soft hit her shoulder. "Wear this." She grabbed the fabric. It was a black t-shirt of his. The fabric was Egyptian cotton, soft and impregnated with his scent in the fibers. "The bathroom is there," he pointed. "Take a hot shower. Take off that makeup. I want to see Isabella, not Mrs. Vitale. Isabella fled to the bathroom as if her life depended on it. 20 minutes later, she came out. Her face was clean, hair damp and loose, and his t-shirt hit mid-thigh, swallowing her small figure. Matteo was sitting on the edge of the bed, barefoot, wearing only gray sweatpants that hung dangerously low on his hips. His torso was bare. Isabella stopped in the bathroom doorway, mouth dry. Defined muscles, old silver scars marking his ribs and shoulder, and a dark tattoo climbing up his left arm. He was a brutal work of art. He looked up and saw her in his t-shirt. His pupils dilated. "Better," he said, voice thick. "Much better." Isabella looked around the room, nervous. Where do I sleep? In the guest room?" "The guest room is being renovated. And the living room sofa is Italian leather, uncomfortable for sleeping." He patted the mattress beside him. "You sleep here." "Matteo." She began, squeezing the hem of the t-shirt. "That wasn't part of the contract." "Sleeping in the same bed?" "The contract says you are my wife. Wives sleep with their husbands." He lay down, crossing his arms behind his head, biceps flexing. "Besides, the house is full of servants. If the maid enters tomorrow morning and finds the bed empty beside me, the charade ends." It was logical. Annoyingly logical. "Do you promise to behave?" she asked, taking a hesitant step toward the bed. Matteo turned his head on the pillow to face her. A corner smile, lazy and dangerous, curved his lips. Isabella, if I didn't behave, you wouldn't be wearing that t-shirt right now. You wouldn't be wearing anything. Her face burned, but she walked to the bed. She pulled the duvet and lay down on the furthest edge possible, back to him, tense as a violin string. Relax, tesoro, his voice came from the darkness, closer than she expected. The storm outside is the only danger tonight. The room fell silent, except for the howl of the wind and the crackle of the fireplace. But Isabella couldn't sleep. She could feel his heat radiating through the mattress. Suddenly, a heavy arm passed over her waist. Isabella gasped when Matteo pulled her back, gluing her back against his broad, warm chest. They fit perfectly, like two pieces of a puzzle. Matteo, she protested, trying to pull away. Be quiet, he murmured against her hair, arm holding her firmly, but without hurting. I'm cold. And you're warm. This is sleeping, he cut her off, his breath tickling the back of her neck. Now close your eyes, Isabella. Before I decide that sleeping is a waste of time. The veiled threat, or promise, made her heart race, but she stopped fighting. Slowly, the tension left her shoulders. The scent of sandalwood enveloped her. The rhythm of his breathing against her back was hypnotic. It was madness, it was dangerous, it was wrong, but for the first time in years, Isabella Rossi, the baker who carried the world on her shoulders, felt protected. Good night, Matteo, she whispered, voice heavy with sleep. He squeezed her waist a little tighter, burying his face in the curve of her neck. Buonanotte, mia bella, he replied in the darkness. And while the snow buried New York outside, in the wolf's bed, the lamb fell asleep, unaware that the real danger wasn't being devoured, it was never wanting to leave. Isabella woke up with a sensation of weight and warmth. Something solid was pinning her down, and the smell of sandalwood and male skin filled her lungs. She opened her eyes and blinked, confused. Before her was not the cracked wall of her tiny apartment, but a broad, tanned, bare chest. The memory of the previous night hit her like a train. Matteo. She was practically on top of him. One of her legs was thrown over his hips, her face buried in the curve of his neck, and her hand. God, her hand was splayed right over his heart. Isabella tried to move away slowly, holding her breath. If she could slide out of bed without waking him. If you move one more inch, Matteo's voice vibrated against her forehead, raspy with sleep and dangerously low, I won't be responsible for my actions. Isabella froze. She lifted her face slowly. Matteo's blue eyes were open, watching her with a lazy intensity. He didn't look like a mafia don now. He just looked like a man who woke up with a woman in his arms and liked what he saw. Good morning, Mrs. Vitale, he teased, a sleepy smile curving his lips. I'm sorry, Isabella stammered, pulling her leg back and rolling away from him until she almost fell off the bed. I invade people's space when I sleep. It's a terrible habit. Matteo sat up, the sheet slipping to his waist, revealing defined abs. He ran a hand through his messy hair. Didn't hear any complaints from me. He looked at the clock on the nightstand. 7 in the morning. You fall out of bed early. Bakers wake up early, she said, standing up and smoothing down his t-shirt that served as a dress. I need to do something. My hands are itching. The bathroom is all yours. No, she said, already walking to the door. The kitchen. I need to cook. Matteo raised an eyebrow, but Isabella had already escaped into the hallway before the tension in the room made her explode. The penthouse kitchen was a dream of stainless steel and Carrara marble, but it felt cold, sterile. Isabella opened the giant refrigerator. It was full of expensive ingredients, but soulless, organic eggs, almond milk, imported fruits, cheeses that cost her rent. She found a gourmet panettone still in the box, probably a Christmas gift no one opened. Perfect, she murmured, rolling up the sleeves of the oversized t-shirt. Half an hour later, the smell of butter, cinnamon, vanilla, and caramelized sugar floated through the penthouse, driving out the smell of lonely alpha male and replacing it with home. When Matteo entered the kitchen, he was already showered and dressed in black tailored trousers and an impeccable white shirt, but he stopped in the doorway as if he had hit an invisible wall. The scene before him was too domestic. Isabella, wearing only his t-shirt, hummed softly as she flipped golden slices in the pan. The morning sun reflected off the diamond ring on her finger, casting rainbows on the wall. For a second, Matteo felt a pang in his chest. An ancient pain. This is a lie, he reminded himself. It's a contract. But his stomach rumbled, betraying his logic. What is that smell? He asked, approaching the island. Isabella turned, smiling. A genuine smile, without the fear of the previous night. Panettone French toast with mascarpone cream and orange zest. It's the breakfast of champions, or of people who need a lot of sugar to process the fact that they are married to the mafia. Matteo let out a surprised laugh. He sat on one of the high stools. Serve me, wife. Let's see if it's worth the investment. She placed a plate in front of him. Matteo cut a piece and ate. His expression changed. He chewed slowly, eyes closing briefly. When he looked at her again, there was new respect there. My mother used to make something similar, he said, voice suddenly soft. But hers always burned on the bottom. Yours is perfect. Food is love, Matteo, Isabella said, pouring herself coffee. If you make it in a rush, it turns out bad. If you make it with care. I don't have time for care, he cut in, coldness returning to his voice as he remembered who he was. I have an empire to manage and a war to avoid. The sweet moment shattered like glass. Matteo's cell phone, sitting on the counter, began to vibrate violently. The name on the screen made his jaw clench, Luca urgent. He answered on speakerphone, without stopping eating. Speak. Boss, Luca's voice was tense, accompanied by the sound of sirens in the background. We have a problem on 42nd Street. Isabella froze, the coffee cup stopping on its way to her mouth. 42nd Street? She whispered. That's where my bakery is. Matteo raised a hand to silence her, eyes fixed on her. What kind of problem, Luca? Someone threw a Molotov cocktail through the window of Dolce Vita this morning. The fire was contained quickly, the firefighters are there, but the facade is destroyed. And they left a message painted on the sidewalk. Isabella's hands began to tremble. Her plate fell to the floor, shattering. My shop. She choked out. What does the message say? Matteo's voice was pure ice, lethal and calm. It says, sweets for the bride, bullets for the groom. The wedding is over. Matteo hung up the phone. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Isabella was pale, tears filling her eyes. They attacked my shop because I'm with you. It's all I have, Matteo. My grandmother's recipes, my equipment. Matteo stood up. He rounded the island in 2 long strides and grabbed her arms, pulling her to him. There was no gentleness now, only a fierce intensity. Listen to me, he ordered, forcing her to look at him. Your shop can be fixed. Glass and brick I can buy. But this was a warning. A warning? They tried to burn my dream. They tried to hit me through you, Matteo growled. His eyes were dark, a storm forming. They think you are my weak point now. He released one of her arms to caress her face, thumb wiping away a furious tear that escaped. They just made the worst mistake of their lives. No one touches what is mine, Isabella. No one. He stepped away, grabbing his phone again and dialing a number as he walked to the kitchen exit. Get dressed, he threw over his shoulder. We're going out. Where? To the police? Matteo stopped at the door. He looked at her, and the smile he gave made her blood run cold. It wasn't the smile of last night's lover. It was the smile of the monster. The police fill out reports, Isabella. I fill coffins. We are going to hunt down who did this. And then, we are going to rebuild your shop and make it look like a palace. Isabella stood in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by the sweet smell of vanilla and the bitter promise of violence. The fairy tale was over. The war had begun. The car ride to 42nd Street was a blur of silence and speed. Matteo's armored SUV cut through New York traffic like a shark in shallow waters, ignoring red lights and honking horns. Isabella sat beside him, hands clenched in her lap, skin pale against the black leather of the seats. She wasn't crying. Shock had dried her tears, leaving only a coldness in her stomach that not even the car's heater could dispel. Matteo didn't touch her during the ride. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid, aggressive Italian, giving orders that sounded like death sentences. But his free hand rested on the center console, inches from hers, like an anchor ready to be dropped in case she needed it. When the car stopped, the smell hit them before they even saw the damage. Smell of burnt sugar. Melted plastic. Acrid smoke. Isabella opened the door and stepped out, legs trembling. The facade of Dolce Vita, with its pink and white striped awnings and the windows she polished every day, didn't exist anymore. In its place was a black, charred hole. The sidewalk was covered in shattered glass that glittered under the winter sun like broken diamonds. Firefighters had already extinguished the flames, leaving everything soaked and freezing rapidly in the cold air. Yellow police tape isolated the site, but Matteo's guards were already there, forming an impenetrable perimeter, keeping onlookers and journalists away. No. Isabella's whisper was a breath of pain. She took a step toward the ruins, shoes crunching on glass. That place was her grandmother's legacy. It was the only thing keeping her sister in college and her mother in a care home. It was her life. Don't go in there, Matteo's voice came from right behind her, firm and authoritative. I need to see if anything is left, she said, voice cracking. Nana's recipe book, it was on the back counter. She tried to pass the tape, but Matteo grabbed her arm. Not with force, but with unwavering firmness. Isabella, the structure is unstable. And it's a crime scene. It's my shop, she shouted, turning to him, anger finally breaking through the shock. She punched his chest, weakly and uselessly. It's all your fault. They did this because of your fiancé. I should have stayed home. I should have refused your damn money. Matteo's men, guards hardened by years of violence, looked away, uncomfortable. No one yelled at Don Vitale. No one touched him in anger and lived to tell about it. But Matteo didn't move. He accepted her blows, absorbing the fury and pain as if he deserved every ounce of it. When she finally stopped, panting and sobbing, he pulled her against his chest. He wrapped her in his cashmere coat, protecting her from the wind and the sight of the destruction. You're right, he said, voice low against her hair. It is my fault. I brought the war to your doorstep. He held her face between his leather-gloved hands, forcing her to look into his eyes, which burned with a cold and terrible promise. But now listen to me well, every brick that fell here will cost them blood. The recipe book. If it's burned, I hire the best restorers in the world. If the shop is gone, I build a bigger one. I build a sugar empire for you, if need be. I don't want an empire, Matteo, she sobbed. I want my life back. That life ended the moment you stepped into my elevator, he said, brutally honest. Now you are a Vitale. And Vitalis don't cry over ruins. They build over them. Boss. The interruption came from Luca, the head of security. He approached cautiously, holding a tablet. The shop's security system was melted, but we got footage from a traffic camera on the corner. Matteo released Isabella but kept her at his side, arm around her shoulders like a shield. He took the tablet. The video was grainy, but clear enough. A canary yellow sports car stopped in front of the shop at 5 a.m. 2 men got out, broke the glass, and threw the Molotov cocktails. A yellow car. Isabella recognized it the same instant Matteo did. Stefano, she whispered, horrified. That is Stefano's car. He did this because you humiliated him last night? Matteo's expression became empty, devoid of any humanity. It was the face of the monster people feared. Stefano is a coward, Matteo said calmly, handing the tablet back to Luca. He doesn't have the guts for this alone. Someone gave him the order. Someone is using his envy to get to me. He looked at the message spray-painted in red on what remained of the side wall. Sweets for the bride, bullets for the groom. Clean this up, Matteo ordered Luca, pointing at the graffiti. And bring the car. We're going to pay a visit. To the police? Isabella asked, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Matteo looked at her. There was a darkness in him now that scared her, but also fascinated her. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. His hand was warm, large, and protective. No, tesoro. The police deal with the law. I deal with justice. He began guiding her back to the SUV. We are going to visit Stefano. And you are going to be by my side when I ask him who gave him the matches. Isabella stopped. Me? You want me to go with you? To see violence? Matteo stopped and looked at her, snow falling on his dark lashes. You are my wife, Isabella. They attacked what is yours. In my world, revenge isn't a dish served cold. It's a dish shared at the table with family. He opened the car door for her. Get in. It's time for you to show these people that Mrs. Vitale doesn't break as easily as a glass window. Isabella looked one last time at her ruined bakery. Sadness gave way to something harder, sharper. She remembered Stefano's humiliation at the party. She remembered the fear of losing everything. She got in the car. Matteo smiled, a dark, proud smile, and closed the door, sealing the fate of whoever had dared to light that match. The private club Velvet was where the prodigal sons of New York went to spend their father's inheritances away from public eyes. It was noon, but inside it was always midnight, red velvet, low lights, and music vibrating in the floor. When the double doors opened, it wasn't to let in another VIP guest. Luca and 2 other guards of Matteo entered first, clearing a path with brutal efficiency. The music was cut abruptly. The DJ, seeing Luca's expression, dropped his headphones as if they were on fire. Silence fell over the club, heavy and suffocating. Then, Matteo Vitale entered. He was still wearing a white shirt and black trousers, without the jacket, sleeves rolled up showing tense forearms. He didn't look like a businessman, he looked like an executioner on his way to the gallows. And beside him, head held high and face pale but determined, was Isabella. Stefano was in a booth at the back, surrounded by empty champagne bottles and sycophants. He was laughing at something, a loud, shrill laugh that died in his throat as soon as his eyes met Matteo's. The crystal glass slipped from Stefano's hand and shattered on the floor. Matteo didn't run. He walked. Every step of his Italian shoes on the wooden floor echoed like a countdown. People moved away, pressing themselves against the walls, desperate not to be noticed by the dawn. Matteo. Stefano stammered, trying to stand up, but his legs failed him. I can explain. I didn't. Matteo reached the table. With a fluid and violent motion, he grabbed Stefano by the lapel of his yellow silk jacket and yanked him out of the booth, throwing him onto the glass coffee table. Bottles flew. Women screamed and fled. Stefano tried to crawl backward, but Matteo placed a hand on his chest, pinning him to the table. Explain? Matteo's voice was frighteningly calm. You are going to explain why my wife woke up crying this morning? Are you going to explain why her shop is in ashes? It wasn't me. Stefano shouted, eyes wide with terror. I was here all night. Ask anyone. Matteo looked at Isabella. He extended his free hand, without looking away from Stefano. The lighter, Isabella. Isabella blinked. She had seen a silver lighter, forgotten by someone on a nearby table. With a slightly trembling hand, she picked it up. The metal was cold against her palm. She walked over to them. Stefano looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't see the cake girl. He saw the woman standing beside the devil. Isabella placed the lighter in Matteo's hand. Matteo lit it. The blue and orange flame danced inches from Stefano's sweating face. Do you like fire, Stefano? Matteo asked softly. Do you like to see beautiful things burn? Matteo, please. My father is a partner in the bank that finances your father, Matteo interrupted, will thank me for sparing him the shame of having a pyromaniac son. He lowered the flame, bringing it close to Stefano's silk tie. The smell of singeing fabric filled the air. Stefano screamed, thrashing like a fish out of water. It was me. It was me, he yelled, crying. I just wanted to give her a scare. She humiliated me. You humiliated me because of a nobody. Matteo extinguished the lighter and balled his hand into a fist. The sound of the punch connecting with Stefano's jaw was a nauseating crack that made everyone in the club flinch. Stefano fell to the floor, spitting blood. Matteo prepared to lift him again, fury pulsating in the veins of his neck, but felt a gentle touch on his arm. Isabella. Matteo, she said, voice firm amidst the silence. He stopped, turning to her, eyes still clouded with violence. He destroyed your dream, Isabella. He deserves worse than this. He deserves it, she agreed, looking at Stefano, who moaned on the floor, holding his swollen face. But if you kill him here, in front of everyone, you go to jail. And if you go to jail, who is going to rebuild my bakery? There was a pause. Matteo looked at her, surprised by the cold, pragmatic logic. She wasn't asking for mercy out of kindness. She was asking for intelligence. A corner of Matteo's mouth curved. Pride. He straightened up, adjusting his shirt cuffs. Then, he looked at Stefano with absolute disgust. You got lucky, Stefano. My wife is more merciful than I am. And much smarter than you. Matteo crouched beside Stefano, grabbing his hair and pulling his head back. Your father is going to receive the bill for the reconstruction of Dolce Vita. And it's going to be the most expensive bakery in the history of New York. You are going to pay every cent, every mixer, every gram of flour with interest. He released Stefano's head, which hit the floor with a dull thud. And if you look at her again, if you say her name again, I won't use fists. I will use fire. Matteo stood up and extended his hand to Isabella. Let's go, Mrs. Vitale. This place smells like trash. Isabella accepted his hand. As they walked to the exit, passing the terrified faces of New York's elite, she felt a shift inside herself. The girl crying over $500 had been left in the ruins of the shop. The woman walking out of the club hand in hand with Matteo Vitale knew that, in that dangerous world, fear was currency. And for the first time, she wasn't the one paying, she was the one collecting. In the car, the silence lasted only a minute. Matteo pulled her onto his lap, burying his face in her neck, the adrenaline of violence turning into something else. "You stopped me," he murmured against her skin. "No one has ever stopped me before." "Someone has to take care of business," she replied, running her fingers through his dark hair, heart beating wildly. "Besides, I prefer you here with me than in a cell." Matteo lifted his head, eyes burning. "You are dangerous, Isabella." He kissed her, a hard, possessive kiss, tasting of victory. "I think I'm going to like rebuilding your empire." Christmas Day dawned with a pale sun reflecting on the snow accumulated on the penthouse ledges. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside quiet and white, like a blank page waiting to be written on. Inside the penthouse, the atmosphere was one of luxurious laziness. Isabella was in the living room, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, watching the giant Christmas tree. There were no presents under it, at least, not the mountains of boxes one would expect from a millionaire. Matteo came down the stairs. He wore a dark blue wool sweater that made his eyes look like the deep ocean in comfortable sweatpants. He looked less like the Don and more like the man Isabella was starting to love. The thought scared her. Love. It was too soon. It was too dangerous. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Vitale," he said, his raspy morning voice sending a shiver down her spine. He brought 2 mugs of steaming coffee. "Merry Christmas, Matteo." She accepted the mug. "Thank you for not letting me spend Christmas alone and jobless." Matteo sat on the sofa beside her, close enough that their legs touched. "I have something for you." Isabella smiled sadly. "Matteo, you already saved my life, humiliated my enemy, and promised to rebuild my shop. I don't need diamonds." "They aren't diamonds." He pulled a thick brown envelope from behind a cushion and placed it in her lap. "Open it." Isabella left the mug on the table and opened the envelope with curious fingers. She pulled out an architectural blueprint. Detailed technical drawings of a commercial space. But it wasn't just any space. It was Dolce Vita. But bigger. Better. There was an expanded area for tables, an industrial kitchen with state-of-the-art ovens Isabella had only seen in French magazines, and a second floor? "What is this?" she asked, eyes wide. "I bought the building," Matteo said simply, taking a sip of coffee. "The tenant upstairs was thinking of selling. I convinced him to expedite the process. Now the entire building is yours. You can live above the shop if you want, or expand. No rent. Never again." Isabella's hands shook. Tears, hot and fast, filled her eyes. This wasn't just money. This was security. It was freedom. It was him paying attention to every detail of the dreams she had barely dared to whisper. "Matteo, it's too much. I can't accept it." The contract said $100,000, not a building in Manhattan. Matteo took the blueprint from her hands and set it aside. He held her face with both hands, wiping the tears with his thumbs. "The contract," he murmured with disdain, "was written by a man who didn't know he would wake up every day wanting to see you smile." Isabella's heart stopped, then restarted at a frantic pace. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he leaned in, brushing his lips against hers, "that I don't want to pretend anymore." He kissed her. It wasn't a show kiss for an audience. It wasn't a stolen kiss in the kitchen. It was a kiss of devotion. Slow, deep, and overwhelming. Matteo kissed her as if she were air and he was drowning. Isabella wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, undoing the distance between them. The blanket fell forgotten to the floor. Matteo laid her down on the sofa, his body covering hers, heavy and warm. "Are you sure?" he asked against her mouth, voice faltering. "If we cross this line, Isabella, there's no going back. I won't let you go when the year ends." Isabella looked into his blue eyes, seeing the raw vulnerability behind the power. She saw the boy who grew up in a violent world and the man who was willing to burn the world for her. "I don't want to go anywhere," she whispered. "Make it real, Matteo." He didn't need to hear it twice. Matteo lifted her in his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her upstairs to the master bedroom. The winter sunlight streamed through the windows, but the world outside ceased to exist. He undressed her with a reverence that made her feel like a goddess. Every touch of his hands, every kiss on her skin, was a promise. And when he finally joined with her, skin against skin, soul against soul, there was no contract, no mafia, no lies. There was only Isabella and Matteo. She arched her back, screaming his name when pleasure hit her, and he held her tightly, burying his face in her neck, whispering words in Italian that sounded like profane prayers. Hours later, they lay tangled in black satin sheets, breathing returning to normal. Matteo traced invisible patterns on Isabella's bare back, a satisfied and lazy smile on his lips. "You know," he said, kissing her shoulder, "I think I'm going to sue the Dolce Vita bakery." Isabella laughed, sleepy and happy. "Why?" "Because the engagement cake was never delivered." He propped himself up on his elbow, looking at her with a mischievous glint. "I think the owner owes me lifetime compensation." "Lifetime is a long time, Don Vitale," she teased, running her hand across his chest. "For us." He took her hand and kissed the ring that now seemed to belong there. "Lifetime is just the beginning." Isabella smiled, feeling complete. Christmas had brought a miracle, the wolf had fallen in love with the lamb. But while they kissed again in the safety of the penthouse, down below on the cold street, a man watched the building with binoculars. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "She is there," the man said. "And it seems Bianca isn't coming back. Vitale has a new weak point." "Excellent," a female voice replied on the other end of the line. "Then let's break him." The happiness in the penthouse lasted exactly 48 hours. It was 2 days of plans drawn on napkins, breakfasts in bed, and Matteo ignoring calls from associates to watch old movies with Isabella. But the real world, as always, demanded entry. On the morning of the 27th, Isabella was at the dining room table, surrounded by fabric swatches for the new chairs at Dolce Vita. Matteo was on the phone on the balcony, watching the snow-covered city, one hand in his trouser pocket and the other holding a cigarette he hadn't lit. "Luca," Matteo said, entering the room and closing the glass door behind him. His expression had changed. The lover had disappeared, the dawn was back. "We have a visitor in the lobby." Isabella looked up, feeling an immediate chill. "The police? Because of the fire?" "No." Matteo walked over to her and placed a hand on her shoulder in a possessive and protective gesture. "Worse. Security let her up because she still has access credentials." "Her?" Isabella asked, standing up slowly. Before Matteo could answer, the private elevator doors opened with a soft ding. A woman stepped out. She was tall, blonde, thin as a runway model, and wearing a white fur coat that looked like it cost more than Isabella's new building. She dragged a Louis Vuitton suitcase with one hand and held a silk handkerchief in the other, as if wiping invisible tears. "Bianca. The runaway bride." She stopped in the middle of the lobby, looking around as if she owned the place. When her eyes landed on Matteo, she let out a theatrical sob and ran toward him. "Matteo. Oh, amore mio. What a terrible mistake I made." She tried to throw herself into his arms, but Matteo took a step back, pulling Isabella in front of him. Bianca crashed against an invisible wall of indifference. She stopped, blinking, and finally looked at the woman Matteo was protecting. Bianca's eyes dropped to Isabella's left hand. To the ring. Her ring. The fake crying stopped instantly. Bianca's face hardened, transforming into a mask of contempt. "Who is this?" Bianca asked, voice sharp as broken glass. "And why is she wearing my diamond?" "This," Matteo said, voice calm and lethal, "is my wife's ring. And you have no things in this house, Bianca. You lost everything the moment you got into that Pilates instructor's car." Bianca huffed, crossing her arms. That was a moment of panic. Prenuptial stress. Paolo, he meant nothing. He didn't even have money to pay for the hotel. She tried to soften her expression, looking at Matteo with a seductive smile. "But I came back, darling. I realized my place is here, with you. Nana Elena will be so happy." "Nana Elena," Matteo interrupted, "adores Isabella." Bianca laughed, a shrill sound. "Please, Matteo. Don't be ridiculous." She pointed a manicured finger at Isabella. "Look at her. She is common." "What is she?" "The maid? A high-end escort you hired so you wouldn't be embarrassed at the party?" Isabella felt anger rise up her neck. She took a step forward, stepping out of Matteo's protection. "I am the woman who didn't leave him at the altar," Isabella said, voice firm, though her legs trembled. "And I am the woman wearing this ring. I think that answers your question." Bianca's eyes narrowed. "You are a fraud. And I will prove it." She turned to Matteo, playing her last card. "Listen to me well, Matteo. The merger contract with my father's family, that $200 million deal? It depends on the union of our families by blood. My father will never sign the agreement if you are married to this, nobody." Silence fell over the room. Isabella looked at Matteo. She knew how important that deal was. It was the reason this whole charade had started. 200 million. Power. Alliances. Bianca smiled, sensing the advantage. "Throw her away, Matteo. Take the ring off her, send her back to the gutter she came from, and I'll pretend none of this happened. We get married next week, my father signs the contract, and everything goes back to normal." Isabella felt her heart break. It was logical. It was business. She looked at Matteo, waiting for him to let go of her hand. Waiting for him to choose the empire. Matteo looked at Bianca. Then he looked at Isabella. He saw the fear in her brown eyes, and he saw the arrogance in Bianca's blue eyes. He let go of Isabella's hand. Isabella's world collapsed. He's going to choose the money, she thought. Of course he is. But Matteo didn't push her away. Instead, he walked up to Bianca, invading her personal space until she backed up against the elevator. "You think you know me, Bianca," he whispered, voice vibrating with contained fury. "But you forgot the most basic rule of the Vitales. We don't negotiate with traitors." "What?" Bianca paled. "Your father can keep the 200 million. I'll make another deal. I'll find another partner. But there isn't enough money in the world to make me accept you back in this house." Matteo turned to the door. "Luca." The head of security entered immediately. "Yes, Don Vitale? Escort Miss Bianca to the exit. And make sure she takes nothing that doesn't belong to her." Matteo looked at Bianca one last time. "If you set foot in this building again, or if you try to contact my grandmother, the Pilates instructor won't be the only one to disappear." You will regret this. Bianca screamed as Luca grabbed her by the arm. You are destroying everything because of a baker. My father will destroy you. The elevator doors closed, cutting off her screams. Isabella stood paralyzed in the middle of the room. Matteo turned to her. The tension in his shoulders was visible. He had just lost a fortune. Matteo. She began. 200 million. It's just paper, he said, walking to her and holding her face. Paper burns. But what we have. He kissed her forehead. That is rare. But as he held her, Isabella saw something in his eyes that scared her. Not regret. Concern. Bianca had made a real threat. The war with her father was coming. And Isabella knew that, this time, the target wouldn't be just a shop. It would be Matteo. We have to prepare, Matteo murmured, looking at the elevator door. The party is over, tesoro. Now the storm begins. The invitation arrived the next morning, not by mail, but delivered by hand by a courier in an armored car. It was a black, heavy envelope with the Moretti family wax seal. Matteo read the card on the kitchen island, his jaw growing tighter with every word. Isabella watched him, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. What does it say? She asked. Matteo threw the card onto the marble. It's an invitation. Giovanni Moretti, Bianca's father, invites us to a reconciliation dinner at his estate in Long Island. Tonight. Reconciliation? Isabella frowned. After he threatened to destroy you yesterday? In the Mafia, reconciliation is code for ultimatum. Matteo ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. He wants to look you in the eyes. He wants to evaluate the woman who cost him a multi-million-dollar merger. And he wants to give me one last chance to backtrack and marry his daughter before declaring open war. He turned to her, expression grave. You are not going. I'll go alone. I'll say you are indisposed. Isabella set down the cup. Fear was there, cold in her stomach, but anger was stronger. If I don't go, I'll look weak. I'll look like the weak point they think I am. Isabella, Giovanni isn't Stefano. Stefano is a spoiled playboy. Giovanni is a shark. He eats people like you for breakfast. Then it's good that I'm indigestible. She walked to him, placing her hands on his broad chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. Matteo, you said I am a Vitale now. Do Vitalis hide? Matteo looked at her, conflict evident in his blue eyes. He wanted to lock her in a tower and protect her, but he also saw the fire in her. The same fire that had captivated him on the night of the cake. No, he murmured, covering her hands with his. We don't hide. But if you go with me, you have to promise one thing: don't eat anything, don't drink anything that hasn't been served to me first, and never, never leave my side. I promise. The Moretti mansion looked like a feudal palace. Wrought iron gates, guards armed with automatic rifles in the garden, and an atmosphere so heavy it felt hard to breathe. Isabella wore black. A tight velvet dress, long sleeves, with a neckline in the back that was elegant and provocative. Matteo had given her a ruby necklace that looked like coagulated blood against her pale skin. Remember, Matteo whispered when they got out of the car. You are the queen. They are just rebellious subjects. They entered the dining room. The long table was set for 4 people. Giovanni Moretti sat at the head, a corpulent man with silver hair and reptilian eyes. Bianca was next to him, drinking wine, with a smug smile on her lips painted red. Matteo. Giovanni didn't stand up. And the famous baker. Mrs. Vitale, Matteo corrected coldly, pulling out the chair for Isabella to sit. the dinner was psychological torture. Servants served exquisite dishes that no one touched. Giovanni talked about business, about loyalty, about how old traditions were being forgotten because of fleeting passions. "You know, Matteo," said Giovanni, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "Love is a beautiful thing. But it doesn't pay the bills. And it doesn't protect borders. I heard the Russians are moving in on the docks. It would be a shame if you didn't have my family's capital to fight them." It was a direct threat. "Marry my daughter or I let the Russians destroy you." "I deal with the Russians my own way," replied Matteo, without drinking the wine. Bianca let out a sharp laugh. "Your way? And what is her role in that?" She pointed her fork at Isabella. "What is she going to do? Throw cupcakes at the enemies?" Isabella set her silverware down softly. The sound of metal against porcelain echoed in the silent room. "Mr. Moretti," Isabella began, ignoring Bianca and addressing the father directly. "Your wine is excellent. But your strategy is flawed." Giovanni stopped chewing. His eyes fixed on her. "What did you say, girl?" Matteo tensed beside her, his hands sliding under the table, probably for the gun strapped to his ankle. "I said your strategy is flawed," repeated Isabella, keeping her voice calm and velvety. "You think Matteo needs your money to survive. But you forget that Matteo's reputation is based on respect, not buying alliances. If he married your daughter after she abandoned him at the altar, he would look like a weak man, desperate for money." She paused, letting the words settle. "And a weak man loses respect. If he lost respect, the Russians would attack anyway, and your money would be useless. By choosing me, by choosing loyalty over convenience, he showed strength. And that is why his men would die for him." Isabella tilted her head, defiant. "I wonder, Mr. Moretti, would your men die for you? Or just for your check?" The silence in the room was absolute. Bianca's mouth was open. Matteo looked at Isabella with a mixture of shock and a pride so fierce it almost lit up the room. Giovanni Moretti dropped his knife. His face turned red, then purple. "You have a sharp tongue for a nobody," he growled. "She is a Vitale," Matteo said, standing up. The chair scraped the floor with an aggressive sound. "And she is right. Our dinner is over, Giovanni." Matteo extended his hand to Isabella. She stood up, majestic in her velvet dress. "You walk out that door, Matteo," Giovanni said, voice low and shaking with rage, "and you will discover that all your bank accounts have been frozen. My contacts at the bank acted 10 minutes ago. You have no liquidity. Tomorrow, your men don't get paid. And the day after tomorrow, you are dead." Isabella felt Matteo's grip on her hand increase until it hurt. It was the financial blow they feared. "Keep the money," Matteo said, without looking back. "I prefer to be broke and free than rich and chained to this table." They left the mansion with their heads held high, passing the armed guards. But as soon as they got into the car and the doors closed, Matteo's mask fell. He hit the steering wheel with his hand, a violent blow of frustration. "Maledizione! Curse it," he shouted. He froze everything. Everything. "I can't pay the suppliers, the guards, not even the penthouse mortgage." Isabella touched his arm. "We'll find a way." "How, Isabella?" He looked at her, eyes full of desperation. "This isn't a cake you fix with more sugar. It's a war. And without money, I have no army." Isabella looked at the ring on her finger. The gigantic diamond Bianca had rejected and Matteo had given her. Then she looked at the ruby necklace. "You have an army," she said softly. "And I have an idea." "What idea?" Isabella smiled, a small but dangerous smile. Remember when you said I was an artist? Well, it's time for Dolce Vita to expand business. And I know an ingredient Giovanni Moretti can't buy. What? Public opinion. Isabella picked up her phone. Let's turn this mafia drama into the love story of the century. And let's make the whole world buy what we are selling. Matteo looked at her, confused, but hope was starting to shine in the ashes of despair. What are you planning, Tesoro? I'm planning to use the only weapon Bianca doesn't have, said Isabella, opening her phone's camera. Authenticity. The penthouse was plunged in gloom, lit only by the city lights. Matteo paced back and forth, phone glued to his ear, trying to find a legal loophole, a favor, anything that would release the frozen money. But with every call, the answer was silence or a nervous apology. Giovanni Moretti had closed every door. Isabella, sitting on the sofa with her phone in hand, watched him. Matteo, she called. Not now, Isabella. I'm trying to stop my men from deserting tomorrow due to lack of payment. Matteo, sit down. There was an authority in her voice that made him stop. He looked at her, exhausted, tie undone. What are you doing? Saving us. She pointed to the spot next to her. Sit. And wipe that I'm going to kill someone look off your face. I need the face of the loving husband who just fell victim to an injustice. Matteo sighed, but sat down. You're going to make a video for the internet? Seriously? Giovanni has judges in his pocket and you have Instagram? Giovanni has old money, Isabella said, adjusting the lighting of the ring light she had improvised with a lamp. He operates in the shadows. No one knows who he is, and that's how he likes it. But you? You are young, handsome, and just married a baker whose shop was torched. She turned on the front camera. The world loves a Cinderella story, Matteo. But the world hates the villain who burns down the castle. Trust me. She pressed the live button. In seconds, the numbers in the corner of the screen began to climb. Hundreds. Thousands. The news of the fire at Dolce Vita had already made local papers, and curiosity was morbid. Hello everyone, Isabella began. Her voice didn't shake. It was sweet, but with palpable sadness. Many of you know my shop, Dolce Vita. You know it was my grandmother's dream. And you know that, yesterday, someone set it on fire. She rested her head on Matteo's shoulder. He went rigid for a second, but then, instinctively, put his arm around her, kissing the top of her head. Comments on the screen exploded with hearts and shock reactions. They say it was an accident, continued Isabella, looking at the camera with big, moist eyes. But we know the truth. There are powerful people who didn't want us to be together. People who think love has a price. She raised her hand, showing the diamond ring, but also the slight burns and soot that still stained the sleeve of Matteo's shirt, which she had him put on purpose. They froze our accounts today, she confessed, a partial lie that sounded like absolute truth. They tried to take everything from us. The shop, the money, the security. They think that without money, we will give up on each other. She turned the camera to Matteo. What do you think, love? She asked softly. Matteo looked into the lens. He didn't need to act. The anger he felt for Giovanni and the fierce love he felt for Isabella merged into an expression of devastating determination. They can burn the building, said Matteo, his deep voice resonating on thousands of phones. They can take the money. But as long as I breathe, my wife won't shed another tear. We will rebuild. Brick by brick. We won't open the physical store tomorrow, Isabella said to the camera. But we are selling online. The revenge box. The best sweets from Dolce Vita. If you want to support us against the bullies, the link is in the bio. She ended the video. Silence returned to the room. Matteo looked at her, skeptical. The revenge box? Isabella, we need millions, not cookie money. Isabella's phone pinged. Then pinged again. And again. In seconds, it became a continuous buzz, a vibration making the coffee table shake. Look, she said, turning the screen to him. Sales notifications from PayPal and the online payment system were coming in so fast it was impossible to read names. 50 euros. 100 euros. 500 euros. 20 euros. People are buying, Isabella said, a smile breaking across her face. Not just for the sweets. They're buying the story. They're buying the idea of helping the couple in love against the corrupt system. In 1 hour, they had made 50,000 euros. In 3 hours, 200,000. But that wasn't all. Matteo's personal phone rang. It was an unknown number. Who is it? He asked, answering cautiously. Vitale, a Russian voice, heavy with accent, sounded on the other side. I saw your wife's video. My daughter showed me. She is crying. Says you are the most romantic man in New York. Matteo frowned. Volkov? The head of the Bratva? The very one. The Russian laughed. Giovanni Moretti is a dinosaur. He froze your accounts. How stupid. He just made you a martyr. And I hate Moretti. He charges fees too high at the docks. There was a pause. If you need liquidity to pay your men tomorrow, Vitale, the Bratva can make a loan. Interest-free. Only one condition. What condition? Matteo asked, eyes fixed on Isabella, who was replying to Instagram comments like a general on a digital battlefield. I want exclusivity on importing Russian goods when you take Moretti's place. Because after this, public opinion is with you. Politicians will distance themselves from him. He is toxic now. You are the hero. Matteo hung up the phone, stunned. He looked at Isabella. She hadn't just sold cakes. She had, inadvertently, negotiated an alliance with the Russian mafia and isolated Giovanni Moretti politically, all with a 3-minute video and sad eyes. Matteo walked to her, took the phone from her hand, and threw it on the sofa. What is it? She asked, scared. Did it not work? Matteo grabbed her by the waist, lifting her into the air and spinning her. He laughed, a sound of pure liberation. Did it work? Isabella, you are a criminal genius. Volkov just offered funding. Moretti is finished. He can't attack a couple the entire internet is protecting. If he touches you now, the world comes down on him. He kissed her hard, full of adrenaline. You said you were going to use authenticity as a weapon. He rested his forehead against hers. Remind me never to let you have a Twitter account. You are more dangerous with an iPhone than I am with a pistol. Isabella smiled, wrapping her arms around his neck. I told you. The world has changed, Matteo. Dinosaurs like Giovanni don't know how to use hashtags. Outside, snow continued to fall, but the fear was gone. They had money. They had allies. And they had the public. The only thing missing was the final blow. Giovanni Moretti's office was on the top floor of a financial skyscraper, a bastion of glass and steel that screamed untouchable power. But on that morning of December 28th, the air conditioning didn't seem to be working, because Giovanni was sweating. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk, looking at the tablet where his company's stocks were in freefall. Political partners weren't answering calls. The bank had called to warn that a surprise audit was on the way. The office door opened without a knock. Giovanni's secretary tried to protest but was gently moved aside by Luca. Matteo Vitale entered. He wore an impeccable gray suit, tailored, and walked with the lightness of someone who has already won the war before firing the first shot. Beside him, Isabella. She wore a white winter dress, a cream coat, and the diamond ring shining on her left hand. She looked untouchable. "You don't have a scheduled meeting, Vitale," Giovanni growled, closing the tablet. "I don't need meetings to visit my properties," Matteo replied calmly, sitting in one of the leather chairs in front of the desk, uninvited. Isabella remained standing beside him, hand resting on his shoulder. "Your properties? You're delusional. I froze your accounts. You are a dead man walking." "You were the one controlling the bank, Giovanni," Matteo said, crossing his legs. "But the one controlling the docks now is Volkov. And the one controlling public opinion," he pointed at Isabella with his chin, "is my wife." Giovanni laughed, a nervous sound. "Public opinion? You think likes on Instagram topple empires?" "They topple reputations," intervened Isabella, voice soft but firm. "And investors hate bad reputations. Yesterday's video was shared 3 million times. The hashtag Justice for Dolce Vita is trending worldwide. Your partners saw it. And they don't want to be associated with a man who burns down family bakeries." The side door of the office opened and Bianca entered, eyes red from crying in anger. "Dad," Paolo called. "He says the paparazzi are at the door of our building. They're calling me the cruel bride. No one wants to sell me anything in the Fifth Avenue stores." Matteo smiled. Not a happy smile, but one of predatory satisfaction. "Looks like your world is shrinking, Bianca." Giovanni slammed his hand on the table, standing up. "Enough. I end you both now. I have men outside." "Your men?" Matteo interrupted, voice dropping an octave, becoming pure steel. "Your men weren't paid this morning, Giovanni. Because you were so busy trying to put out PR fires that you forgot the basics. Loyalty is bought. And the bratva pays better." Giovanni paled. He looked at the door, expecting security to enter to kick Matteo out. No one came. The silence in the hallway was absolute. "What do you want?" Giovanni asked, falling into his chair, defeated. Matteo leaned forward. "I want retirement." "Retirement?" "Your retirement." Matteo pulled a thin folder from his jacket and threw it on the table. "Sign the transfer of transport routes to my name. Pass the board chairmanship to me. And you and your daughter go on a long trip. Maybe to the Riviera. I heard it's beautiful this time of year, if you like solitude." "I will never sign that." "Then the bank audit will find proof of money laundering," Matteo said, shrugging. "Proof that I, conveniently, already sent anonymously to the FBI 10 minutes ago. If you sign now, I withdraw the complaint and say it was a clerical error. If you don't sign, you spend New Year's in a federal cell." Giovanni looked at the document. His hands trembled. He looked at Bianca, who was crying silently in a corner, her arrogance destroyed by the reality of losing social status. He picked up the pen. The sound of the pen scratching paper was the only noise in the room. It was the sound of a king abdicating the throne. Giovanni pushed the paper to Matteo. "Take everything. But remember, Vitale, he who climbs too high, falls from very far." Matteo took the document, verified the signature, and stood up. "I won't fall, Giovanni. Because unlike you, I am not alone at the top." He extended his hand to Isabella. "Let's go, Mrs. Vitale. We have a bakery to reopen." They turned their backs on the Morettis. As they walked to the elevator, Isabella felt her legs shaking, adrenaline leaving her body. "Is it over?" she whispered when the elevator doors closed, isolating them in the metal cocoon. Matteo pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck. He was shaking too, but from relief. "It's over," he confirmed. "The empire is ours. The city is ours." Isabella pulled away slightly to look at him. "And us? What are we now?" "The contract is over. You have what you wanted." Matteo looked at her, blue eyes shining with an emotion that didn't need words, but he said them anyway. "The contract was for a year," he murmured, caressing her face. "But I am a greedy man, Isabella. A year isn't enough. I want the decade. I want the century. I want to see your hair turn white beside mine." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "That sounds like a new proposal." "It's a renegotiation of terms," he smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "No expiration date this time. Do you accept?" "Only if I can keep making breakfast," she replied, smiling through tears. "Done." The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened to a lobby full of camera flashes and journalists shouting questions about the golden couple of New York. Matteo adjusted her coat, intertwined his fingers with hers, and looked ahead. "Are you ready for your first appearance as the true queen of New York?" Isabella squeezed his hand. "As long as you are by my side. I'm ready for anything." They walked out into the light, together. 1 year later. Snow fell gently on the gleaming glass facade of the new Dolce Vita. The line of customers wrapped around the corner of 42nd Street, people waiting patiently in the cold for a slice of the famous bride's cake or the cannolis that the New York Times food critic had called divine. Inside, the heat was welcoming and smelled of sugar and fresh coffee. Isabella moved through the expanded kitchen with the grace of a conductor, commanding a team of 6 bakers. "More ganache on table 2, she ordered, smiling. "And make sure the Volkov birthday cake comes out perfect. We don't want to upset the Russians." The back door of the kitchen opened. The noise of the bakery died instantly. The staff stood rigid. Matteo Vitale entered. He shook the snow off the shoulders of his black wool overcoat. A year had passed, but he hadn't lost an ounce of his imposing presence. He was still the Wolf of New York, the man who controlled the city with an iron fist. But when his eyes met Isabella, the ice melted. He walked to her, ignoring the respectful and fearful looks of the team. "Boss," greeted one of the bakers, lowering his head. Matteo nodded briefly, but his attention was entirely on the flour-covered woman in front of him. "You're late, Mrs. Vitale," he said, looking at his wristwatch. Isabella wiped her hands on her apron and smiled, lifting her chin in a challenge only she could get away with. "Business is booming, Don Vitale. Your wife is a very busy woman." "Too busy for her husband?" He invaded her personal space, putting his arm around her waist and pulling her against his impeccable suit, not caring about the flour. "Never," she whispered, accepting the kiss he gave her. A deep, proprietary kiss that made her knees weak exactly like the first day. "Let's go," he said against her lips. "Nana Elena is waiting for us for supper. And you know how grumpy she gets if the food is late." Isabella took off her apron. "I have the cake ready. Raspberry and white chocolate. Our favorite." "Take the cake," Matteo said, grabbing her coat. "I'll handle the rest." They left through the back door, where the armored car waited. As Matteo drove through the illuminated streets of New York, his hand found hers on the center console, intertwining fingers. The diamond on her finger caught the light of the street lamps. "Do you know what day it is?" asked Matteo, looking at the road. "Christmas," Isabella replied, teasingly. "It's been exactly 1 year today," he continued, voice grave. 1 year since a crazy baker invaded my penthouse and tried to charge me $500 while I was trying to save an empire. Isabella laughed. And you tried to buy me for 100,000. The worst deal of my life, he said, stopping at a red light and turning to look at her. You were worth so much more. I should have offered the whole world right from the start. The contract ended today, she reminded him gently. Technically, I'm free. Matteo squeezed her hand tightly. You will never be free of me again, Isabella. We renegotiated, remember? Lifetime. I know. She bit her lip, the secret she had been keeping for 2 days burning on the tip of her tongue. But I think we're going to need to make an addendum to the contract. Matteo frowned, the immediate concern of a protector arising. What happened? Did someone threaten you? Did Moretti try to come out of retirement? No, nothing like that. Isabella took Matteo's hand to her belly, placing it over the fabric of the velvet dress. It's an expansion clause. Matteo looked at his hand on her belly. Then he looked into her eyes. The man who toppled empires, who faced bullets and fires, stopped breathing. Isabella? His voice cracked. Are you saying? I'm saying the next Vitale heir is going to need a crib in the penthouse. And will probably like cake very much. A shocked silence filled the car. Then, a smile broke across Matteo's face, the purest, most radiant and happiest smile she had ever seen. A baby, he whispered. A baby. Matteo unbuckled his seatbelt, leaned over the console, and kissed her. There was no lust, no haste. Only absolute gratitude. I promise, he said, forehead resting against hers, tears shining in his blue eyes, that he, or she, will never have to fight like we fought. The world will be safe for them. I will guarantee that. I know you will, said Isabella. The light turned green. The car started smoothly in the snow. Isabella looked out the window. New York shone outside, cold and beautiful. A year ago, she was alone, cold, and scared. Now, she had an empire, a love that defied logic, and a new life growing inside her. She looked at the man beside her. The wolf. Her monster. Her hero. Matteo? Yes, Tesoro? That was the best delivery I ever made. Matteo smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. And it was the only gift I ever really wanted. They headed home, through the snow, ready to live happily ever after in the only fairy tale where the villain gets the princess, and together, they rule the kingdom. The end.